Hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. Today, another classic, another often quoted film with a very famous climax that sometimes people will parody because it's so infamous and so melodramatic, but also a very well respected film all round. That is the Rob Reiner 1992 legal war drama, A Few Good Men. I have to say, the 90s is becoming a period that I'm noticing that started to experiment with genre hybridization. And I'm not saying that didn't exist before, but the 90s seems to be the point in which, we've each major genre and subgenre had been almost explored and experimented with. And as I've talked about extensively, the 90s was also where the meta-text really came into force, with films like Scream. But, as I say, this was feels like a period where genres were being experimented with and, as I say, crossed over. Sometimes in quite aggressive ways, like From Dusk Till Dawn, which of course is a 2000s film, but you go from very serious crime drama to out and out vampire film. But as I say, Few Good Men is a much subtler, simpler version of it. So this is a legal drama and a war drama, although I suppose legal war drama is a better way to establish it because you don't get much many of the war drama tropes on screen. It's more explained and explored, but I think it should be acknowledged in regards to the effort that's made in that respect to this film, where it's the kind of film that assumes you already have a sound knowledge and experience of war dramas, particularly post World War II war dramas, Korean War, Vietnam, Apocalypse Now, Platoon, that kind of war drama. It's the kind of film that a solid knowledge within that base of genre is advantageous because it means you have a greater understanding of, the stakes and the experiences of characters and where really they're coming from. And again, this is, as I said before, the 90s, I distinctly remember being the period that was sold on prolific director with an incredibly strong star-studded cast. Very much the characters turning to the camera, using clips of the film type advertisement. And this is definitely within that ilk. You have, of course, Jack Nicholson, who is just phenomenal in this. Genuinely, he brings a gravitas to it that I've talked about with many films, where you have this older, more experienced director who knows how to draw the camera and draw the audience to him in any scene he's in. I've talked about it with Alec Guinness. I've talked about it with Sean Connery. This where a film, if it wants to have a certain credibility to it, has an actor of that gravitas amongst the cast. And then you have, of course, Tom Cruise and Demi Moore. And again, they are, considering these are two actors who are still fairly early in their career. They're not, it's not quite the 80s where with Tom Cruise, we're not quite in the legend territory with Tom Cruise. But for both Tom Cruise and Demi Moore, we're at that point now where they are being taken seriously as actors, and they're obviously wanting to do more mature, serious projects like this. Tom Cruise is the kind of actor who I remember Tom Cruise has sort of been in the zeitgeist for my entire life. I remember seeing him at an unacceptably young age in an Interview with a Vampire and thinking he was, thinking he was really good in it. Then I went through a phase, of course, where once you're in the sort of mid 2000s onwards, and of course at that point I was starting to develop a taste for film and a more mature understanding of what I liked, what I didn't, which stars I was interested in seeing and which I wasn't. I definitely was in a phase of my life where Tom Cruise was the guy from the Mission Impossibles, the big Hollywood star who in his personal life was a little bit all over the place, but he was also very much a you know what you're getting kind of actor. And I think as a teenager, that really turned me off because I wanted much richer, more. I say that's what I wanted. That's very arrogant, I suppose. But there was that sense where someone like Tom Cruise, I didn't find particularly interesting because he was the kind of guy who I was like, okay, I've seen Last Samurai. Well, actually, I've watched the first hour of Last Samurai many, many times. That's as far as I've gotten through that film. I've seen several of the Mission Impossibles. I know what kind of performer Tom Cruise is, and I'm just not interested. And in his case, the film that really turned me was Valkyrie, which was about a coup d'etat within the Nazi Party, where, of course, during World War II, he was a key figure in attempting to assassinate Hitler. And again, I was fascinated by this performance change and seeing something in him that I hadn't seen before. When I was talking about Suicide Squad, I talked about how Will Smith, the problem I have is that he can only really work within a certain bandwidth of performance style. And so playing a character like Deadshot is a little bit outside of what he seemed to be willing to do, because Deadshot is a mercenary type character who unfortunately doesn't. Well, it's shades of grey, but he's very much a complex anti-hero, and it just was outside of Will Smith's remit. Similarly, Tom Cruise, I just didn't think he would have the ability to play anything other than dashing heroes, this sort of larger-than-life Hollywood figure. And that film demonstrated it. And coming back to this now, with A Few Good Men, you really get that. You really get, this is, of course, a Tom Cruise who isn't the big megastar, but he is an actor who is already gaining quite a lot of respect because he shows so much in this. He shows, the ability of an actor who can play a complex person, someone who isn't just a heroic lawyer or a damaged lawyer or someone who the type of lawyer who isn't quite whiter than white, but will fight the good fight. He's very much all of those things and none of and much more. And I think the fact that he gives that personality so much to it, and again Demi Moore, the two of them have so much, such a great relationship in this film. The fact that you have someone who, Demi Moore is clearly supposed to represent the sort of dedicated naval soldier who is an excellent legal, young, possibly a bit inexperienced, but clearly has a great mind for the law. But the one unfortunate weakness that she has is that she is a woman, and so therefore, in this male-dominated environment, is just constantly being undermined and disrespected. Especially in that scene with Jack Nicholson where they're visiting him. I mean, that's such a difficult scene because there's so much performance going on and so much subtext, where, of course, you have that moment where Jack Nicholson is undermining Demi Moore's character by saying, the great thing about a senior officer is, and then he sort of refers to an oral sex act being performed by a female senior officer being a great demonstration of masculinity and the discomfort that creates. And then, of course, he's quite disrespectful of Tom Cruise and, of course, throws a homophobic slur at the way he's dressed. And, like I said, the three of them in that scene are so well placed together. And, like I say, Tom Cruise is so rich in his performance. There's so much going on. It is a really really strong performance from him. I don't know. I think I really connected with this because I don't. Perhaps it's because I, again, revealing a bit about myself. I grew up essentially on a military base and with quite a sort of military facing sort of family, and so consequently, you know, as I'm watching this film and I understand the tension and what's at stake, and the idea that it's not just these two men who are on trial, it is the Marines as a whole. And you have a character like Jack Nicholson, who some readings you could see as just being this arrogant, almost almost believing his own legend type character. But on other readings, you could see someone who is just simply trying to do so, to be the best soldier against an unspeakable force. And there are all these different readings and layers to his performance. But at the same time, you have a great legal drama where it's treated with such maturity, and it's the idea of, okay, these people need to be held up to account, and it doesn't matter that these people thought they were doing the right thing, or these people are basically denying it and closing ranks. They're just because it's a difficult situation that isn't a simple thing to explore, doesn't mean that justice can't be found within it, and that someone who isn't just these two soldiers who, yes, they did a bad thing, but they did it believing they were doing it for the right cause. Someone should be held to account at a higher level than just two soldiers who were given orders. And I think it deals with it with such maturity and such an understanding of what is at stake. And yes, it's not a flawless film. It's very 90s. There are certain elements of it in the directing style, the visual, the cinematography, which is very, I'd almost be tempted to say cheesy 90s. Having seen Young Guns earlier last week and having that sort of 80s tint to it, there's something about this that made me think, well, this is early 90s, so it's not even 90s. It's late 80s style to it. And unfortunately, that does knock it down a little bit, that it kind of loses the timelessness simply because it has these very... cliche is not quite the right word, but very tacky elements to that you think, oh, I don't love the way that this is shot, or I don't love the way that this scene plays out. Particularly in the ending, where I just think, oh, the ending, you have the big climax, the big scene between Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise, where it's all about, the one that is often parodied, the you can't handle the truth. And then the film ends, and in the ending, in the sort of epilogue, last couple of minutes, it's very 90s. It's very cheesy. The dialogue, the way it's staged, it just, I don't know, it kind of almost steps out of its own narrative for a minute to kind of be more like, almost something where it turns to the camera and say, hey, the goodies win, the baddies lose, everything's all right in the world. And I don't know, it doesn't quite do it for me. It slightly breaks the reality of its own story. And as I say, that big you can't handle the truth scene is good. And I've talked before about these scenes that when they're taken out of context and people make fun of them, the primary example being Marriage Story, where it works because once you've earned the scene, the emotions of it feel real. The scene at the end of A Few Good Men, it does work, and Jack Nicholson makes it work, but it does even then feel a little performed and a little bit as in, okay, we've got to this denouement, we need to do this big performance, because the build up to it works, and at the same time, I don't know, it doesn't entirely work for me, but I appreciate the mechanics of it. And again, Jack Nicholson, once he gets into that speech, is phenomenal. Of course, he is masterful on camera. Now, I do think this is a very good film, despite those last issues I have with it. I do think this is an excellent film. I think it's a mature film, and I think that should be appreciated. Not because of sex or violence, but because it handles a complex subject matter with a certain grace and gravitas to it. And it kept me engaged for the whole watch that I wasn't anticipating. Just being fixated on this character drama, on the sort of mechanics of how you navigate this sort of military type of situation. So I think this is an excellent film. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you liked the video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because this will help me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 200 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.